the houses are primarily the same. I can't believe what two young men did to our residence at 4052 Pleasant. It was a big home. As I say, there were 10 children raised in that home. They completely changed the outside and the inside. It's beautiful. Every Valentine's Day, they have an open house. And my sisters, some of us, go over there to see that place. But I can, as I say, remember some of the priests, some of the young physicians that were raised in that parish. During my days in Incarnation, there were 15 physicians in Incarnation Parish. I can name Dr. Richdorf, Dr. Rainier, many of these. In 1980, there were none. And that's just the way the population's gone. But I would say probably 75% of the homes that are here now were there in the 30s and the 40s. But, in fact, our home was built in 1912. We moved in 22. They have the landscaping. I was impressed today coming down the landscaping. They have flowers down to the curb and more evergreens. This is the biggest improvement. And as I was remarking to one of my compatriots, John Zingzheim, John, a very successful engineer for years, where his house was on the corner down by 40th and Pleasant, how we go through the neighborhood periodically and how impressed we are with how well they've kept up the homes. It's the old saying, this guy paints his house, the next thing, the other guy says, well, maybe I'll paint mine too. This is great pride that these neighbors have, and it pleases me because, as I say, I knew most of the people, all since deceased, that lived on all those homes from 41st to 38th and Pleasant. Behind the main school in 1930s, east of the school was a huge brick building. It was the telephone company. That, I think, has been replaced, but that was the only other building. Yes, I remember Pillsbury right behind school, behind the church, many of the people that lived in that area too, because we spent so much time in this church. But I can't recall a few changes on Nicollet and 38th Street. Doctor's offices were there. John Kelly was office in that area. And I remember when his kids, the Nicollet Hardware it was called, and for $4 at the most, we could take our skates down and exchange them for a pair that would fit us. We took them there for sharpening, 25 cents to sharpen your skates. And I remember some of the changes that went on in 38th and Nicollet. But we spent a lot of time at Nicollet Hardware. Louis Agassiz School was open, yes. We knew where it was. As we referred to them, there were the publics. Those were the publics that went to Louis Agassiz. It was very close to Incarnation Parish, of course. I recall many times walking to the theater on Saturday afternoon matinee, both at the Lindale Theater on Lake and Lindale and the East Lake Theater on right behind the Minneapolis ballpark on Lake Street. But the one sign that I recall on a building on 31st and Lindale was, I think it's still there, was "Be kind to the aged. Remember, you too are getting older." I remember reading that so many times, walking that, And I believe that it's still there. I'm not sure. I think all of us will never forget our first communion. Today the boys wore blue serge seats. We all wore knickers. Nobody was in long pants. I have pictures taken at that time. I remember very definitely my first confession, and we were confirmed in this church. As I say, most of us boys became altar boys and served Mass at 6:30. My first Mass, I'll never forget, my father came down with me. It was in the winter, it was dark. I tried to get the candles, tall candles, lighted on the altar, and I couldn't get them lighted, so finally I came down and lit the lower ones, and my dad said, those were the ones you were supposed to be trying to illuminate. But I'll never forget reaching way up there, trying to reach those 6 tall candles. As I say, everything was church. Tenebrae during Lent was a big service, and most of us sang in the choir from the time we were in college on. It was 3 nights, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night of Holy Week. I can recall the lineup for confession on those days just prior to Easter Sunday and of course to Christmas, almost out to the street. We were encouraged as kids to go to confession at least every 2 weeks. Father Phelan, love his heart, he could say Mass faster than anybody I knew. And it always surprised us that in the confessional, right along with the penance, he would often assign us, Joe, would you serve 6:30 Mass next week? I didn't know how he knew who we were, but he knew everything. Serve 6:30 Mass, Father. In those days, occasionally Father John Ryan would take us down to Guardian Angels Parish in Hastings. We'd play basketball. Or he would take us to a movie. I can't imagine today, unfortunately, Johnny coming home and saying, Mom, Father Smith wants to take us to a movie this afternoon. But that's, there was no question about the safety of children in the hands of priests. As I say, basketball was scouting. Al Hemp and Ike Struble were our scoutmasters. And scout was once a week. The Flaming Arrow was our patrol. We played basketball and then we got to business. Many of us didn't go very far in scouting. My youngest son, Nick, one that's a physician, is an Eagle Scout, and his 2 boys are going to be Eagle Scouts. I think it's a great organization. We had a pretty good scout troop here. I spent 46 years of my adult life in Annunciation Parish that had an outstanding scout troop, and many of the boys went on to be Eagle Scouts.